for the song this evening. We are in Proverbs chapter 4. So we are continuing our Bible study here. This is number 10 and entitled, Don't Get You Started. Proverbs chapter 4 and verses 14 to 27. So we'll be looking at the rest of this chapter. So the address that opens chapter 4, and we looked at that, I guess it's been a couple of weeks ago now, really pressed the feminine wisdom motif that you have in Proverbs, personifying wisdom as a desirable woman, a quality, worthwhile woman, and uses language there and imagery that sort of depicts a man pursuing a woman for marriage. And so we went from the valuable treasure that was used to describe wisdom in the earlier parts to a more personal image, an image that is more aligned with a loving relationship. Solomon also proceeds to expose the way of folly and the heart of evil, the very core of it, you might say. So he uses personal imagery in the latter part of this chapter, and he does it, it's sort of a repetition type, and he uses different parts of the body, eye, ear, heart, that sort of thing. And the effect of that is that it encompasses the whole person, your whole being, in avoiding the way of the wicked and going in the way of wisdom. So we'll get started here. Let's see. Verse 14, enter not into the path of the wicked and go not into the way of evil men. So the first part of this, which be verses 14 to 19, warn about the way of folly or the way of the wicked, the way of evil. And when you consider the warnings that come out in these verses, they are very strong and they are very insistent. These are not given as suggestions of things you might want to consider. They're spoken more forcibly than that. And we again continue to see this driving metaphor in Proverbs, the path, the way. It's used to speak of the way of wisdom, the way of righteousness, the way of life, but also the way of the wicked, the way of evil, the way of folly, the way of death. Those is just a driving metaphor that goes throughout the book of Proverbs, this way. And we've talked about that a number of times. It talks about the course of your life. But notice here you start to see some of the parallels. You get the wicked and you get evil men and their way and their path. And so it's sort of stuck in a parallel. Referring to the wicked, the word is refers to sort of morally corrupt, morally bankrupt, people, without a moral compass, or however that you want to put that. And the word evil is actually the word we've encountered a number of times. Oftentimes we think of it as calamity. So, essentially it's comparing men to a natural disaster. So you want to avoid the way of those going in the way of some disaster and calamity. Now, once again, the strong message coming through Proverbs is that there are only really two ways, and they might look different, but really, ultimately, there's just only two ways. you've got wisdom, and you've got folly. And again, wisdom, righteousness, life, and folly, wickedness, and death. Really, that's it. There are only two ways, and anything else is just really a difference in style rather than substance. So the warning continues to be consistent that there are two ways to go, and you want to gain wisdom and understanding to be able to discern between them, and to avoid the one and to go in the other. So really, this strong message that comes out in this part is avoiding, and if you think about it, it's really the message of the Bible throughout is avoiding sin, staying clear of it, and we know that it's best to keep from sin from the very start of it. And I think that's Solomon's message here, and sort of where I took that title. Just don't get started in that way. Don't get started down that road. So that's the strong message that's going to come through. And it continues here. You can see in verse 15, avoid it, pass not by it, turn from it, and pass away. So Solomon, again, just giving a very plain and urgent warning, to stay away from evil. You see the language using avoid it, pass by, turn, pass away. Such instruction like this reveals the foolishness, the sinfulness of trying to get close to sin, trying to figure out, okay, well, I can go up, I can go this far. And that's oftentimes a lot of questions that come from young people and face young people, and thinking about, well, how far can I go this way? How far can I go that way? If where does it become sin and that sort of thing? Um, but wisdom that we see coming from Proverbs is telling us, don't try to play that game. Don't try to play the game of how far can I go this way, how close can I get to this, and so on. Don't play that game. Just don't get started in that way. That's wisdom. Um, verse 16, for they sleep not, except they have done mischief, and their sleep is taken away unless they cause some to fall. We'll include verse 17 here. For they eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. So the point that's being made here in verses 16 to 17 is that the wicked are consumed with evil. They're consumed with going in the wrong way. They go the way of wickedness. They go the way of folly. They go the way of sin. But notice how he describes it. They sleep not. They don't sleep unless they've done something. Their sleep is taken away unless they've caused someone to fall. They are so captive to their sin that they are restless unless bringing some evil, some sin about. Now, this word, mischief, and I don't know, maybe that's a word that's passing away, becoming obsolete. You don't hear it a whole lot. But mischief, sounds kind of harmless. We don't really think that much about it. Doesn't sound that bad. But the word here actually refers to evil, refers to some sort of injury, which can even include death. But there's some real harm being done, is what's being described. It's not like, well, it's a silly little prank or something that they've got to pull. No, they're really trying to hurt and to destroy, because they are so consumed with evil. They have to do harm unless they cause some to fall. They have to do harm to others in some way, or else they're restless. You might think of it as being unfulfilled. They're dissatisfied unless they have caused some to fall, some to stumble, and this does present uh, a particular trouble for young people as well, because as you're in the world and you have knowledge of the Bible, and especially as you would try to live a good life before the Lord and before others, there are many that you will encounter that just want you to fall. They just want you to fall. The world at large loves when some, big name celebrity Christian, so to speak, gets caught up in some scandal. They love to see that, and there will be many that you will meet with who really just want to see you fall, want to see you. Oh well, you don't talk this way. Well, they'll want to see you talk that way. You don't do this or you don't do that, and they'll want to see that. You do this. They don't like it. They'll just want to see you. And it's one of those sort of things that it, it's kind of difficult to understand what the motivation is. What does it matter, to someone else? But you'll find that it does. It does. So living a Christian life and trying to live by the Word of God, trying to honor Him with our life and with our decisions. It's going to mean that you're going to do some things differently, and a lot of people just will not like that. So this is a very, again, just a very relevant part of this address as Solomon is talking to the young in his day. There are those who just want to see you fall. Um, Verse 17 said that they uses this language. They eat and drink. They eat wickedness and violence. Now he uses bread and wine here, but those don't. That's just sort of for eating and drinking. For wine, they're drinking violence. For bread, they're eating wickedness. In other words, it is their diet. In other words, it's like they're sustained by it. Um, Eating and drinking are things that are necessary to life, obviously, and so it gives us this picture as he's talked about eating, or rather sleeping, and now eating and drinking. In other words, he's presenting a picture here of those whose lives are consumed with wicked, with evil. I think it's might be in Titus in the letter that Paul was writing there. He talked about how to the defiled, there's nothing that's pure. Like their thoughts are just wholly evil all the time, and that's the way that we have descriptions of like before the flood and things like that. So the warning again is not to enter in, not to come close to this way, because this is where it ends. This is where it goes. And really, another thing you might say about this is that this way that he talks about mischief and harm and wickedness and violence. What we saw in the first part of Proverbs was how that the message of those that are given to wickedness is made to sound very appealing and can appeal to certain even natural desires and things that we have. And it seems like it's the way of freedom, but Solomon has described them as being entirely in bondage to it. They are entirely captivated by it. They're not free. Um, Verse number 18. But the path of the just is as the shining light that shineth more and more unto the perfect day. So you can see in verses 16 and 17, there's sort of a downward progression. in the wicked. And really, the way that Proverbs presents foolishness, it does progress. It gets progressively worse, not better. If one does not acquire wisdom. So verses 16, 17, they show us this progression, and the way of evil men might look bright in the beginning, but it ends in darkness. It progresses to slavery and ultimately to death, as Proverbs points out. But the way of wisdom is not like that. And notice that this description is sort of like that, of a sunrise that slowly gets higher and higher above the horizon, shining more and more. And that's the imagery we have here, shining more and more unto the full, the full strength. So the way of wisdom is a way that starts, doesn't look maybe as bright, doesn't look maybe as glamorous, but continues to rise. That one that continues to go in wisdom, gets to the full light at the height of the day. Verse 19, the way of the wicked is as darkness, they know not at what they stumble. So here we get this direct contrast. The way of the wicked is darkness compared to the light of the way of the righteous. Um, so the way of wisdom is a path of increasing light, and the way of wickedness is a path of increasing darkness. Um, it is a deepening darkness. And one of the ways we see that described is Paul in Romans chapter number 1, as he talks about sort of a descent into sin. Men deny, they suppress the knowledge of God, and they go further and further into sin and folly and wickedness and so on. So it is that way. The way of the wicked that Solomon is warning against, it's not it's not a way where you can really pick and choose and think, well, I'll take some of the good things and some of the things that I like, and I'll have a little bit of this, and that side of the road gets a little scary. I'll stay on this side of the road and kind of keep going. But Solomon is showing that that's not the case. It's a way of descending and deepening darkness. It's also a hazardous way. They're stumbling, and they don't even know what they're stumbling at. In other words, the darkness. They don't understand. Sometimes you watch some show or a movie, or maybe even you read a book, and the characters maybe making some bad choices that's getting them into all kinds of trouble and situations, and you're just sort of sitting there shaking your head. Oh, why did you do that? Don't do that. Don't. You're driving at home at night. It's raining. It's dark. You get home. The power's out. Don't go down the creaky steps into the scary basement. You don't make that decision. You know that as you're sitting there watching that. But it's sort of like those characters. It's like they don't realize what they're getting into, even though you can see it clearly sitting there watching it. Well, it's sort of the same way that it is with the wicked. They're taken up with this way of evil, and they don't really see the problem, and they don't see what they're stumbling at, and they can be entirely upside down, like they were in Isaiah's day, calling evil good and good evil. Now we start another part here, another address. My son, attend to my words, incline thine ear unto my sayings. So verses 20 to 22 give us this exhortation to be attentive, attend, incline, um, to listen. And we've seen this over and over again. And we continue to think about how that, in our day, and with young people especially, how distracting that the world is. And I don't remember the numbers, but I read something a while back that is sort of goes along with this age of increasing distraction, and how much longer that gap is that those in advertising and stuff, they study how many exposures does someone have to have to an idea, to an image, to a product, or whatever it is before it sticks. And that's what all people are concerned about. They want it to stick, and it's longer now. It takes longer for those things to stick because they're just being bombarded so much. And everybody wants to distract you. They want your attention. If they can get attention, then they can get ad revenue, and they can get likes, and they can get follows, and if they can get your attention. And so they'll go to greater and greater extremes to try to do so. So again, very, very relevant message that keeps coming through. That there really are some things that you need to pay attention to deliberately. There are some things that you need to shut out the distractions, and to pay attention to, and to think about. And obviously, the message of wisdom is one of those things. Um, so, we get these repeated warnings, but that also gives us a very good idea of how it is that we're going to obtain wisdom. Um, it's going to come through paying attention. It's going to come through a deliberate effort. Um, he starts using all of these images here, like ear, and verse 21, let them not depart from thine eyes, keep them in the midst of thine heart. Um, for they are life unto those that find them, and health to all their flesh. We get all these references, and again, it just brings into the idea of the whole person, the whole being. But he starts with the ear here in verse 20. Listen intelligently, listen carefully, listen for understanding. One of the uh, well-known lines out of Ecclesiastes, I think it's Ecclesiastes 5:1. Solomon talked about entering into the house of God and being more ready to hear than you are to speak. And a lot of times we can be quite the different. We feel like, well, I've got something to say. But Solomon says, be more ready to hear than you are to speak. And of course, one of those reasons would be, if we think about other places in the Bible, is that we are certainly going to be judged for those words that we do speak. But he starts with the ear, be ready to hear. And so the immediate response to the teaching of wisdom is not to say something. In other words, it's not to um, object or question or try to correct or try to alter, but to listen and to understand, to really comprehend it in our hearts and minds, what is being said. Um, he goes on addressing these sensory parts in verse 21. Let them not depart from thine eyes, keep them in the midst of thine heart. Um, Eyes are, obviously are how we see where we're going, and how we read, and various things like that. So speaking of the eyes, it'd just be a very easy image for look where you're going. He talked about earlier the way of the wicked and them stumbling in their dark path, and they don't know what they're stumbling at. So wisdom wants to walk in the light and look well to the way that you're going. The heart, and that word, uh, usually it refers to more of what we would think of today as the mind, as the thinking faculty, and it can include emotions and things. It can, um, but typically sort of speaks for just the inner person. And so what he's saying is that these sayings of wisdom that Solomon is giving, they must be fixed in our minds. They must be set in our minds. So walking in wisdom is more the result of deliberate actions than it is sort of the heat of the moment kind of decisions. Um, Verse 22, for they are life unto those that find them, and health to their flesh. Well, wisdom keeps from the destructiveness of the path of folly, and it brings the idea of health, has the idea of soundness, wholeness, um, and it brings that sort of health to life on the earth. But of course, we know that also it brings spiritual life to those and delivers from death. So, life and health are things that are both referred to, that would be rewards, consequences, the good benefits, and it gives good reason to incline our ears and to keep them before our eyes and to fix them in our hearts and minds. Verse 23, keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. So this last part goes right to the end of the chapter, and it's sort of a very practical a practical admonition that he is giving. Um, all diligence, keep the heart with all diligence, and so that means to make the keeping of the heart, to make that a priority. It's something that deserves first attention. Um, the heart, of course, is the source, and that's this issues of life. It's sort of like thinking about, um, well, it gives us the idea of sort of like of a fountain, of the source of a stream. So you think about being at a riverhead or somewhere, where this begins to flow, and obviously there's good reason to want to maintain that supply at its source in purity. I mean, if you contaminate the water at the source, then all the way downstream, it's rendered useless. So that's kind of the imagery. Um, Remember the words of Jesus that he said that it's not what man eats and drinks, or the fact that he has used ceremonially unwashed hands that was never commanded before eating anyway, that it's not the fact that he does those things that causes defilement. So it's not eating something bad or drinking something bad that causes defilement before God, but it's actually what comes out of the heart that defiles us, because that is where sin proceeds from. So we have um, to strive to grasp wisdom, to keep these things fixed, and to keep our hearts set on this, that we don't go astray. Verse number 24, put away from thee a froward mouth, and perverse lips put far from me. Now, obviously, we can see still using imagery, these different parts of the body. Um, Mouth and lips obviously have to do with speech. Um, Froward and perverse are similar words, and they both have the idea of crooked, of bent away. So there's a way of speaking that is a way that is toward wisdom, and then there's a way of speaking that is away from it. And so that's what's being spoken of, sort of the speaking, going the other way, going the opposite way. So guarding the heart and mind is you can think of it in terms of guarding your input and your storage. And so if you're letting the if the input is polluted, then obviously your storage is going to be polluted. It's going to be contaminated. So what comes out of the mouth and the lips, though, is a result of input and storage. It's a result of what we've taken in and what we've stored up and treasured up in our hearts. And so Jesus made that very plain as well. So obviously, this again talks about speech, and there's a lot in the book of Proverbs that has to do with speech, about our tongues, our lips, our mouths, the words that we say. And so obviously, one of the results of wisdom, or one of the works of wisdom, is going to be putting that away. In other words, controlling. our tongues, controlling our speech, is a key attribute of wisdom, and it's not an easy thing. James talked about that in James chapter 3. It's not a light effort to control our tongues, but wisdom. One of the products of wisdom in our lives will be restraint over our tongues. We can use them for good. We can use them to do a lot of damage. And so part of the wisdom is that we would be guarding our speech. Verse 25, let thine eyes look right on, let thine eyelids look straight before thee. So still eyes and eyelids and looking, still using all of these different images. So going in the way of wisdom means seeing that way. It's seeing that way. It's the way of wisdom is not it's not something that you just try. Well, we'll go this way, and if that don't work out, we'll turn around and go back to the fork and take the other side. Well, it's not that sort of thing. One of the ways that Proverbs put this is considering the end. So thinking about where you are and where you're going or where you want to go, and then what the path is to get there, considering that way. So in the old days, we used to get out the maps and the atlas, or sometimes people would go to AAA and they would get those. I forget what they called those. There's almost like a spiral bound little book thing that they would plan your trip and almost give you turn by turn kind of directions and that sort of thing. And obviously, when you start to look at a map, you realize, well, there's many different ways to go. We can get to this destination in many different ways, but that doesn't mean that all of them are equally as good, or there might be a difference in time. There may be some other sort of difference, what have you. And so you're looking to where you want to go, and then you're looking to how that you're going to get there, that path, and then you're going to pick that best path and go that way. And it's sort of what this imagery is that he's using, pertaining to wisdom. And remember that even given the uncertainties of life, and there are a lot of uncertainties in life, and I seem to have more uncertainties the older I get rather than less. You think everything's going to be clearer, but I don't know. You have more uncertainties oftentimes. So even given those uncertainties, Solomon concluded in the book of Ecclesiastes that it's better to walk in wisdom. It's better to have your eyes in your head, which is the way that he puts it there, as opposed to just feeling and stumbling around in the dark. Verse number 26, ponder the path of thy feet, and let all thy ways be established. Well, to ponder, again, I don't know if that's a word that gets a lot of usage these days, but it means to weigh out, to think about, and really you could apply it to making level in the idea of using a balance. And when you have a balance, you put one thing on the one side and you add the weights to the other until you get them balanced, and you know the weight of it, whatever. So it's that kind of idea. To be established is to be set, is to be stood upright, almost like a statue. So wisdom's instructions are to be weighed carefully, and the way that we're going to go is to be considered, and it should be a straight way rather than a crooked and perverse way. Last verse of this chapter: turn not to the right hand nor to the left, remove thy foot from evil. So the proper way is to go straight on, to turn not to the right or to the left. Stay in that way. Don't leave the good way for one thing or another. And so this chapter ends having spoken to the heart, the mouth, the eyes, the feet, and it really speaks to the course of life and our whole person. And overwhelming, don't turn aside, no matter what the inducement might be. Don't turn aside. So that's the overwhelming message in this particular address: is don't even get started in the way of evil. um, and there really are things that get progressively worse, and when you go that way, that's the path that you will be on. Now, it's much easier to avoid a bad situation altogether than to try to get out of one once you're in it. And you've maybe even had some experiences to this point with that, but it certainly does ring true. And so again, Solomon's message is overwhelmingly: don't get started in this way. Cling to the way of wisdom. All right, that's the study for tonight. Any questions or anything on anything we're looking at here? All right, well, if not, I'll pray and we will be dismissed. Almighty Father in heaven, Lord, thank you for the day you've given, and we thank you for your word, and pray that you would help us to learn and to grow in wisdom, and pray that you would help us to discern what is the good way, and that we would stay in it, we would cling to it, not turn aside. Father, I pray your blessing upon those of us here and those that weren't able to make it tonight, and just pray your hand to be upon us, and help us that we would live faithfully, honoring you with our lives and being good witnesses of Jesus Christ every day. Father, I pray these things, asking you would see us to our homes safely and prepare hearts and minds for service on the Lord's day. And I pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.